She traded strands of her childhood for crumbs, thinking no one would ever call her anything but girl. Then he gave her something worth more than bread. He gave her a name. The scissors were dull, and the girl flinched every time the old woman tugged them through her hair. Blonde curls, matted and tangled with ash, fell like tired petals to the dirt floor. She bit her lips so hard she tasted rust, but she didn't cry. Not anymore. Crying hadn't fed her the last time. Crying hadn't stopped her mama from slipping cold on the riverbank. Crying hadn't made anyone in Red Hollow give a second glance to the barefoot orphan girl with a tin cup and a hungry belly. The woman, Miss Greaves, the baker's widow, grunted as she cut. "This much'll get you half a loaf," she muttered, not looking the girl in the eye. "No more." The girl nodded once. Her name wasn't asked, and she didn't offer it. Names were for girls with mothers to whisper them sweetly, or teachers to call them in neat little rows. She hadn't heard hers spoken in weeks. When it was done, she stuffed the bread into a threadbare cloth and ran before the widow could change her mind. The late winter wind bit at her scalp where hair used to fall. Her head felt too light, her stomach too hollow, but the bread was warm, and that was enough. She ducked between alleys, skirting behind the saloon and the blacksmith's, until she reached the boarded-up house near the back edge of town. The boards weren't hers. Someone else had claimed this place once, but they'd been gone long before she came. Now it was just her and the shadows, and if she was quiet and still, they let her sleep. She broke off the heel of the loaf and chewed slowly, letting the warmth spread through her chest like a memory. Then she fed the rest to the mice near the stove. They came each night like clockwork, her only company. That was the last quiet night she ever had. The next morning the sun rose blood-orange through a smear of cloud. She was at the well, waiting behind the tanner's boy and a woman with a red shawl, when she heard the voice. "You cut your hair," it said, not a question. Low, calm male. She spun, startled. Her fists clenched tight around the water bucket handle. The man stood a few feet off, tall, worn coat, boots dusty but well-made. He wasn't from town. His face was unfamiliar, though something about the way he stood, steady, shoulders squared, made her stomach tighten. She didn't answer, just stared, braced to run. But he didn't step closer, didn't threaten or mock or grab. He only reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small. A key. He held it out, palm up. "This belongs to someone," he said quietly. "Don't suppose you'd know who." She blinked, confused, shook her head. He didn't move, just looked at her with eyes that didn't flinch. "What's your name?" he asked. The girl hesitated, then lied. "Sadie." He tilted his head, didn't believe her, she could tell. "You hungry, Sadie?" She shrugged. "I saw you trade your hair for bread yesterday," he said. "That's a kind of hungry I don't forget." Her mouth went dry. The wind cut through her too short hair. "Why you talking to me?" she asked, voice rough. The man didn't smile, but something in his expression softened. "Because I was left on a doorstep once too," he said. "Didn't know who I was till someone told me. Thought maybe it was my turn." She narrowed her eyes. "I ain't your kid." "No," he agreed, "but you're someone else." And then he tucked the key back into his pocket, turned and walked away. She stared after him, heart hammering, unsure whether to be afraid or something else. She didn't know his name. Didn't see where he went. But that night when she returned to the abandoned house, there was a bag by the door. Inside, a blanket, a tin of beans, and a wooden brush. She didn't touch it. Not that night. But she didn't run either. The next morning she found him again, this time by the general store. He was loading supplies into a cart. The horse looked old but steady. She stood 10 feet away, arms crossed, and waited. "You followin' me?" he asked without turning. "No," she lied. He kept packing. "What's your real name?" he asked again. She scowled. "Why's it matter?" "Because I can't fix what I don't know." She didn't understand what that meant, but she answered anyway, barely above a whisper. June. The name hit the air like a promise. The man turned, met her eyes. June, he repeated, then nodded once. I'm Ellis. She didn't ask more. He didn't press. But when he offered her a ride in the wagon, only till the edge of town, she climbed in. And when they reached the edge and he asked if she wanted to go a little further, just to see the hills, she said yes. She didn't know what changed. Maybe it was the way he didn't treat her like she was invisible. Maybe it was the key. Maybe it was just time. But she stayed. That night Ellis built a fire at a camp tucked in the canyon shade. June sat across from him, legs curled under her, the blanket from the sack now draped across her shoulders. She watched him boil beans, watched the way his hands moved, careful, steady, like he'd built hundreds of meals for someone before. Where you headed? She asked finally. Ellis glanced up, nowhere fast. Got a house. He nodded. You got kids? His face tightened, just slightly. Used to, he said. She didn't ask more. He didn't explain. Silence stretched again, but not the cold kind. After they ate, she curled up on the ground near the fire. In the middle of the night, she woke to find Ellis sitting watch, eyes on the horizon. One hand rested on the rifle in his lap, the other held the key. She stared at it. You sure that ain't mine? She asked. Ellis looked at her. I'm starting to think it is, he said. She didn't sleep again that night. Not because she was scared, but because for the first time in as long as she could remember, someone had called her by name, and meant it. June hadn't ridden in a real wagon since before she could count her birthdays on both hands. The bench seat was rough, its edges cracked with time, but Ellis had thrown an old quilt over the boards to make it softer. She sat sideways now, legs tucked, fingers idly brushing the edge of that very quilt as the wheels rumbled over the rutted trail. Trees thinned into gold-grassed hills, then back again into low, scrubby brush as the land unfolded like something trying to remember how to breathe. Ellis didn't talk much, but he wasn't quiet the way most grown men were. He didn't fill the silence with huffs or sideways glances or hard looks. He just let it sit like a second passenger between them, and somehow that was easier. June didn't have to be anything in that silence. Not tough, not thankful, not brave, just there. When they stopped to water the horse, Ellis offered her a canteen and waited while she drank. We'll hit a river by sundown, he said. Camp there, better water, safer too. June nodded but kept her eyes down. She didn't like to seem eager. Folks took eager for weakness. But when the sun dipped and they turned east into a ravine shadowed with cottonwoods, she let herself hope a little. The river was exactly as Ellis had said, wide, slow-moving, and edged with reeds and flat stones. He hobbled the horse, then showed her how to string a line for fish. She watched him gut the first catch with methodical ease, hands moving like a man who'd cooked for more mouths than his own. She didn't ask who. She didn't want to see that flicker in his face again, the one that tightened his jaw and made his eyes go too far away. Instead, she built the fire, stacked the wood like he showed her, and tried not to look too proud when it lit on the first strike. Over fish and beans, she finally asked the question that had burned since the well. That key, she said, what's it go to? Ellis didn't answer right away. He glanced at the fire, the sky, then back to her. A trunk, he said, locked tight, been sitting in my barn 10 years. She frowned. So why give it to me? He poked at the fire with a stick. Didn't seem to belong to me anymore. She didn't press, but she remembered the way he'd held it that night, like it was more than metal and shape, like it hurt to carry and hurt worse to let go. They rode another day after that, deeper into nowhere. Ellis didn't say where they were headed, and June didn't ask. The land changed slowly. Dry hills turned to richer green, the air cooler, heavier with scent of pine and damp soil. That night, as they camped beneath an outcropping of rock, thunder rumbled low in the distance. "You ever been scared of storms?" he asked. June shook her head. "Used to sleep through 'em." "Used to," he repeated, "but not now." She stared into the fire. "Things are louder when you're alone." He nodded like he understood that better than most. By the fourth day she asked it again. "Why me?" Ellis didn't answer right away. He waited until the sun crested a low ridge and lit their path like a golden promise. "Because I needed to hand the key to someone who might open more than a box," he said. "Someone who might open a door." She didn't know what he meant. Not exactly, but it settled in her chest anyway, like a seed dropped on tilled earth. That evening they reached the homestead. It wasn't much. A house, 2 sheds, a barn that leaned slightly like a man with a bad hip, but it was clean kept. The shutters were intact, the fence rails mended. June stood at the gate and stared. "You live here?" she asked, disbelief slipping through. "I did," Ellis said, "a long time ago." She caught the way he said it, past tense. Inside, the house smelled of cedar and dust, and something else, quiet. Not the same silence of back alleys and boarded-up corners, but the silence of rooms waiting to be filled. The key sat heavy in her hand as he led her to the barn. The trunk was there, iron-rimmed, wood dark with age. Ellis didn't touch it. "You open it," he said simply. She knelt, heart in her throat, and turned the key. The lid creaked, slow and stiff. Inside, a stack of folded fabric, a child's carved horse, a Bible with worn pages, and a photograph. June stared at the photo. It showed Ellis, younger, beside a woman with kind eyes and a smile that seemed permanent. 3 children clung to her skirts, 2 boys, 1 girl. The girl had hair like June's. "Your family," she said. Ellis nodded, once. "What happened?" He didn't speak for a long time. Then, cholera took the little one first. Then the fever came for the rest. June swallowed. "You left?" "No," he said. "I buried them. Then I stayed too long in the grave with them, even if I was still walking." June sat back, the trunk still open, the key still warm in her palm. "Why now?" she asked. "Why me?" He met her eyes, and this time there was no distance in them. "Because I saw a girl about to disappear," he said, "and I didn't want the world to lose another name." Tears sprang to her eyes before she could stop them. She wiped them fast, rough with the back of her sleeve. He didn't comment. He just walked to the door. "There's a room upstairs. Hasn't been used in years, but the bed's solid. Clean linens in the chest." She followed without answering. The room was small but warm. A window faced east. Light spilled across the floor in long strips like steps to somewhere better. She slept hard that night. No mice. No wind through cracks. Just breath, soft and steady. And when morning came, she didn't run. She swept the porch, gathered eggs from the coop, watched Ellis repair the gate. By week's end, they had a rhythm. Not fast, not loud, but real. And then came the letter. Folded neat, delivered by a rider who didn't know what he was carrying. Ellis read it once, face still. Then he passed it to her. The seal was broken, the handwriting looped and neat. It was from the church in White Bluff. The reverend there had written of a girl, blonde, 10 years old, missing since the fire last winter. Parents presumed dead, no records found. But someone had seen her at the well in Red Hollow. A match was suspected. Ellis looked at her. "Is that you?" June didn't answer right away. "Then maybe." He nodded. "You want to find out?" She held the letter, folded it once more, then placed it on the table. "I don't need to," she said. "Not if I got a name here." Ellis studied her, then reached across the table and placed the key between them. "You've got more than a name now." She smiled. It wasn't wide, but it was hers. The summer rolled in heavy, thick with heat and the slow hum of locusts. The trees surrounding the old Ellis homestead had grown dense and green again, shading the porch where June sat most afternoons after chores, her bare feet dusted with soil, a piece of straw between her fingers more out of habit than thought. She had taken to humming, not songs she remembered from the alley corners or the bread lines, but newer ones, wordless tunes that came when her hands were busy shelling peas or hauling wash or turning earth behind the shed. Ellis noticed the change before he admitted to himself what it meant. She had begun to lean into the land like it was hers, moving without asking, clearing the fence line, fixing the shutters that always caught in the wind. It wasn't that she was bold. It was something subtler, like she had finally accepted that she wouldn't be asked to leave come sunrise. Still, Ellis wasn't a man to push a good thing. He kept his voice low, his hands steady and his stories rare. But June noticed the shifts. She caught how he paused a little longer in the doorway after supper, how he lingered by the barn before turning in. And most of all, she noticed that he no longer slept with the key tucked in his shirt pocket. It had been weeks since that first opening of the trunk, and June hadn't asked to see it again. But sometimes she caught herself walking into the barn just to stand near it, hand brushing the lid as if the wood might offer some warmth of its own. The photo was still there. She hadn't dared touch it again. One morning she woke before Ellis, which wasn't often. She slipped out to gather eggs and found herself watching the sun crawl up the hills. For a moment she stood there, the sky breaking pink over the land, and she let the silence stretch. Then far off a sound came. Hooves. Not the lazy gait of a tired plow horse, but the sharp, fast rhythm of something urgent. She turned toward the trail, squinting. One rider, then two. By the time they neared the gate, Ellis had come out, rifle in hand, not raised but ready. June moved to his side, her hand near the post where the pitchfork leaned. Not much of a weapon, but enough to mean she wouldn't run. The riders dismounted fast. One was older, silver-haired, eyes sharp under his hat. The other younger, no more than 20, but with the look of someone who'd seen more winters than he should have. "We ain't here for trouble," the old one said, voice gravel but not unkind. "Name's Thorne, sheriff out of Bleak Ridge." Ellis didn't lower the rifle, and him. "Deputy," the sheriff said, "my son." The young man nodded. "Saw dust at your trailhead," he said. "Thought you might have taken in a girl recently. Thin, blonde, scar on the shoulder." June stiffened, but Ellis only said, "Why?" "Because 3 months back she was reported dead in a fire." Thorne reached into his coat and pulled out a crumpled paper. "Except that wasn't true. Her name's Clara May. Parents were school teachers. House burned in January. Folks said the girl didn't make it out." He handed over the paper. A sketch rough, but the likeness was clear. June. Younger, more hollow-eyed, but her all the same. "She came through Red Hollow," the deputy said. "Lady at the well described her exact, but by the time we followed up she was gone." Ellis finally lowered the rifle. June stepped forward. "My name's June," she said. The sheriff met her eyes. "You remember Bleak Ridge?" She hesitated, then nodded. "I remember the smoke," she whispered. "The heat, the floor collapsing." "And your folks?" She didn't speak for a while, then. "I thought they were behind me. I screamed. I waited, but no one came." The sheriff's voice softened. "They died trying to find you." June closed her eyes. "I'm sorry," Thorne said. She swallowed. "Why are you looking for me now?" "Because you've got family in Stillwater. A cousin. Wrote to us when she heard the news. Wants to take you in." June glanced at Ellis, then back at the men. "I'm staying," she said. The deputy looked surprised. "You sure that family's blood? They're offering a real home, school, a life." "I got a life here," she said. "I got a name here." Ellis didn't say anything, but the quiet way his jaw unclenched was enough. Thorne nodded. All right if that's your choice. They rode off by noon, kicking up dust but leaving no trouble behind. June stood by the fence long after they disappeared. That night, Ellis handed her the Bible from the trunk. She opened it slowly. Inside the cover was an inscription, faded but legible. To Ruth, may your hands always hold more than they lose. June stared at the name. Your wife, she asked. Ellis nodded. She wrote that the day we moved in. June ran her fingers over the page. I never knew anyone who thought I'd hold anything, she said. Ellis looked at her then, not like a girl he'd found near starving, not like a stranger with a story too sad to tell, but like someone who might just rewrite it all from the middle. You're holding it now, he said. After that, everything felt different. Not lighter, but steadier. They fell into routine again. June kept the garden, learned to milk the goats, taught herself to read better by candlelight, tracing each word in that Bible until the meanings found her. And Ellis, he began to speak. Not often, but enough. He told her about the daughter who used to chase chickens barefoot through the yard, about the time Ruth taught him to dance in the barn after midnight when they couldn't sleep, about the war and the silence it left behind. Each story came like a stone laid on the path between them, building something neither quite knew the shape of yet. Then one morning, while mending a ripped apron, June found a letter tucked under her plate. It wasn't from Ellis. The handwriting was unfamiliar. The address said Stillwater. Inside, a woman's voice spilled onto the page. My name is Clara May Whitley, and if you're reading this, you're the girl I prayed for every night since January. The letter was long, soft with sorrow, full of open doors. June read it twice, then folded it carefully and slipped it into her coat. She didn't tell Ellis. Not yet. But she kept the name. Clara. It tasted strange on her tongue after so long of being June. But it was hers, always had been. That night she didn't sleep. Instead, she stood at the edge of the barn, the moon slicing silver across the fields, and whispered the name to the dark. Then she smiled. Because for the first time, it didn't feel like letting go of June. It felt like bringing her home, too. Spring deepened into early summer, and with it came a rhythm that was new but not unfamiliar, like a song Clara used to know as a child but couldn't hum until now. The land woke in bursts of green, and so did she. Each morning brought something worth touching, whether it was the dew on the porch rail or the warm fur of the goats pressing their flanks against her leg, impatient for grain. Ellis had started letting her take the lead on more things, sharpening tools, trading eggs into town, even keeping the small accounts in a tidy notebook he left out near the hearth. It wasn't spoken aloud, but it was there in every gesture. He trusted her. Still, Clara kept the letter from Stillwater folded inside her coat pocket. Sometimes she slept with it under her pillow. Sometimes she read it by firelight, mouthing the words like they were a prayer she wasn't sure how to say yet. There were things inside that letter she didn't know how to accept. Things like, "You belong with us, Clara," or "Your mother spoke of you as the light in her life." That last one made her weep into her skirts until her shoulders trembled, because no one had ever called her a light before, and she'd spent so many years trying to be invisible. Ellis noticed the quiet weight that sometimes settled in her eyes, but he didn't push. That was his way, offering space, not questions, and Clara had grown to love him for it. Not love in the way girls dreamed of with ribbons and promises, but in the steady, painful, beautiful way that came from two people who had crawled out of their own graves and chosen to keep walking anyway. One night thunder rolled low in the distance, and the first summer storm came tearing through the hills. Rain lashed the windows. Lightning cracked across the valley like God splitting the sky. Ellis was outside when it started, tying down the stable door. Clara shouted for him, but her voice was lost to the wind. She grabbed a lantern and ran. She found him just as the latch gave out. The barn door slammed wide, nearly catching his shoulder. He grabbed it with both hands, and she pushed beside him, her hair soaked through, her dress plastered to her skin. "You should be inside," he grunted. "So should you," she snapped. Together they wrestled the door closed and bolted it. Then they stood, chests heaving, soaked to the bone, thunder growling above them. Ellis looked at her like he hadn't in all the months before. "You're not the girl I found starving by the well," he said quietly. Clara met his eyes, breath catching. "I'm still her, but I'm more now." They didn't speak the rest. They didn't have to. That night the storm passed. But something else began. In the weeks that followed, Clara stopped calling herself June. Not out loud. Not even in her thoughts. She was Clara May Whitley, and though the world had once tried to take that from her, she was reclaiming it one breath at a time. She told Ellis about the letter, about her family in Stillwater. His face didn't change much, but something in his hands stilled. He was whittling at the time, a little fox this time, sharp and sly. "You thinking of going?" he asked. "I don't know," she said honestly. He nodded. "Well, that's the truth of things sometimes." It was a Saturday when she finally decided to write back. She used Ellis's old ink pen, dipped it in the bottle he kept by the window, and began the letter with hands that shook. "To Miss Abigail Whitley. Thank you for loving me, before I even knew you existed." She wrote until the sun slipped low, and when she finished, she sealed it and walked it down to the post herself. Then came the waiting. 3 weeks. Then 4. She tried not to watch the road. But one dusty afternoon, a wagon came. It wasn't her cousin. It wasn't anyone she knew. But it changed everything. The wagon rolled up slow, pulled by a mule that looked too tired to complain. A boy sat on the bench seat, maybe 12, maybe older. Hard to tell with how thin he was. Beside him, a woman, older, her face sharp and drawn, but her eyes sharp like cracked flint. They didn't speak until they reached the gate. Clara came out, wiping flour on her apron. "Can I help you?" she called. The boy stared at her, then pointed. "That's her," he said. Clara froze. The woman dismounted. "You Clara May Whitley?" she asked. "I am." "You were in Red Hollow last winter?" "Yes." The woman nodded slowly. "My sister took you in for 2 nights, said you didn't eat much, just sat by the fire and stared." Clara blinked. I think I remember." "She gave you her shawl," the woman continued. "Did you keep it?" Clara touched the fringe at her shoulders. "Yes." "She died the next week," the woman said, not unkindly, just tired. "Fever took her, but she talked about you before she passed, said you had hands that trembled but eyes that didn't. She told me if I ever found you I should give you this." She reached into her coat and pulled out a small bundle. Clara took it, unwrapped the cloth. A necklace. Just a pendant on a worn leather string. But Clara gasped. Because she remembered it, not from the shawl woman. From her mother. From the fire. From before. She looked up. Where did she get this? The woman shrugged. Found it at the foot of the stairs, same night she found you. Clara's vision blurred. The woman touched her arm just once. "You matter to people you've never even met," she said. Then she turned and walked back to the wagon. Clara stood there long after they were gone, the necklace tight in her fist. That night she cried in the barn, silent, shaking sobs that left her emptied out like a gourd. Ellis found her there, sat beside her on the hay. He didn't ask, just waited. She held out the necklace. "I thought it burned." He nodded slowly. "Some things survive the fire." They didn't speak much after that, but he stayed beside her until dawn. A few days later, a letter arrived. From Abigail. She would be coming, in person, in 3 weeks' time. Clara read it aloud, heart pounding. "She's bringing papers," Clara whispered. "Adoption if I want it." Ellis looked at her, "And do you?" Clara didn't answer right away. She spent the next days walking the land, touching trees, sitting by the goat pen, lying in the grass near the wildflowers. When Abigail arrived, Clara was waiting at the gate. They embraced like people who knew each other's ghosts. They spent 3 days together, talking, laughing, crying. Clara introduced her to the chickens, the goat with one horn, the old mule that hated apples. When the moment came to sign the papers, Abigail slid them across the table. Clara read every word. Then she smiled. "And didn't sign. I have a last name already," she said gently. "But I love you," Abigail whispered. "And I love you back," Clara said. "But this place saved me. Ellis saved me, and my name is mine now." They cried, and hugged, and promised to write every month. After Abigail left, Ellis found Clara in the barn again, holding the necklace. "You stayed," he said. She nodded, "Because this is home." He looked away for a second, then said, "Got something to show you." He led her behind the house, to the back field. A small fenced plot. And a sign. "Clara's Garden." She stared. "You built this," she whispered. "Started it when the snow melted," he said. She looked at him, tears streaming. "Thank you." Ellis rubbed the back of his neck. "Thought you might plant that necklace there, if you wanted, let it take root." She didn't plant it. She wore it. Every day. Because some things weren't meant to be buried anymore. July came hot and slow, and with it the weight of choice settled into Clara's bones like a second spine. The letters kept arriving, Abigail's handwriting tight and proper, each word soaked in care, each line a tether to the life Clara could have had. She read them all by lantern light, careful not to smudge the ink, careful not to let Ellis see the way they made her hand shake sometimes. Not because of the past, but because of the ache of knowing that somewhere out there, someone had loved her all along and hadn't known how to find her. But Stillwater would not be her home. She had made her choice. Life on the ranch did not pause for emotion. The summer sun cracked the earth and the chickens went stubborn, laying fewer eggs. A coyote got into the goat pen one night, and Ellis had to sit with his oldest buck for hours before the wound closed. Clara stitched the torn flank with trembling fingers, whispered to the creature like it was a child, and felt her own heartbeat slow when its breathing evened out. In another life she could have been a healer. Maybe she still would be. One morning, she rose before the sun and caught Ellis already dressed, his saddle over his shoulder. "Trouble?" she asked, tying her hair back. "Something wrong with the creek," he said. "Water's low, could be beavers or worse." She followed him out without asking. They rode in silence, the only sound the soft thud of hooves against the dry dirt trail. When they reached the creek bend, they found the cause fast enough. A partial dam, debris wedged into a natural choke point where the water twisted back toward the east hills. "Beavers didn't build this," Ellis muttered, dismounting. "Someone tried to block the flow." Clara frowned. Why would someone do that? Could be to reroute for their own crops, or worse, to weaken ours. Would someone really? Ellis didn't answer. His face said enough. They spent the morning pulling brush and broken branches from the bend. Clara worked beside him, mud streaking her arms, sweat soaking her dress. At one point she slipped on a mossy rock and nearly fell in. Ellis caught her with one arm, steadied her with a roughness that didn't quite mask the panic in his eyes. "You all right?" She nodded, breathing hard. "Fine, just surprised me." He let her go slowly. Their hands didn't quite part right away. When the dam finally gave, the water roared forward like it had been waiting for breath. Clara watched it rush over stone and root, cleansing what had gone still. You ever think, she asked later, as they sat beneath a tree drinking water from a shared canteen, that maybe some people never wanted to be saved? Ellis looked at her. You mean yourself? She shook her head. No, I wanted to be saved. I just didn't think I deserved it. He didn't argue. He just looked at her for a long time, then said, sometimes it's not about what you deserve. Sometimes it's just about what's right. That night Clara couldn't sleep. She sat by the open window, watching the moon drag shadows across the porch. The necklace rested against her collarbone like a weight and a promise. Somewhere below, the goats shifted. She thought of the beavers that weren't there, of someone who had tried to cut them off from water, from life. And the next morning, the tracks proved it. Boot prints, too wide to be Ellis's, pressed into the edge of the hill trail. Wagon ruts led east, toward the next property over. The Granger place. Ellis's jaw tensed when he saw them, knew he was trouble. Why? Clara asked. 'Cause Granger's a man who believes he owns what his eye can see. They didn't speak of it again that day, not directly, but Ellis spent the afternoon reinforcing the fence near the creek. Clara kept a loaded rifle near the porch, just in case. 2 days later they found the chicken coop door unlatched. Half the hens gone, no sign of blood or feathers, just absence. Ellis stood there a long time. Then quietly he said, "He's testing how far we'll let him go." "What'll we do?" Clara asked. Ellis looked at her. "We wait, and we don't give him the war he wants." But that night Clara didn't sleep again. She couldn't shake the image of Granger's wide boots crushing the edge of their water, taking what wasn't his, laughing about it. She knew men like that, had seen them in alleys, in auction pens, in firelight, always laughing. The next morning she rode into town. Alone. She didn't tell Ellis. She left a note on the table, her handwriting firm. "I'll be back by dusk, don't worry." The general store was quiet, just the shopkeep polishing jars. Clara bought salt and molasses and then asked casually, "That Granger wagon still come through here?" The man's eyes flicked up. "Twice a week, buys flour and tobacco." "Ever mention our creek?" He blinked. "Yours." "Ellis Rook S." The man swallowed. He said it used to be wild land, said he was just helping it along. Clara nodded. "That's what I figured." She left without saying more, but on the way out she saw a flyer nailed to the board. Stillwater Foundlings, Home, seeking lost kin of Clara May Whitley. Her name printed. She stared at it until the letters blurred. And then she tore it down. Back home, Ellis was waiting on the porch. "You went to town," he said. "I had to see it for myself." He nodded once, and "He's not done." Ellis stared past her to the hills. "Then we better be ready." That night the fire in the hearth burned low. Clara sat at the table, hands folded. "I won't let him take this," she said. Ellis looked up. "I know." "No, I mean," she paused, "I won't let him take you." He set the knife down. "Clara." "I've been lost most of my life," she whispered. "I won't be again." Outside, the wind howled like a warning. But inside, they stood like mountains. The next morning, Granger came. 3 men with him. All on horseback, all armed. Ellis met them in the yard. "Come for a talk?" he asked, voice calm. Granger grinned. "Come for what's mine." Ellis's jaw clenched. "There's nothing here that belongs to you." Granger gestured behind him. "That creek always ran through open land. No one claimed it. It runs through mine now." Clara stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand. Granger saw her, smiled wider. "Your girl's got spirit," he said. "She's not my girl," Ellis replied. "She's her own, and she says you're trespassing." For a moment, no one moved. Then Granger laughed. "We'll see who the law sides with." He turned his horse, spat in the dirt, and left. But they all knew. This wasn't over. Not by a long stretch. The days that followed unfolded with the kind of quiet that isn't peaceful, only taut. Like a rope stretched between two wagons that haven't started moving yet, but are pulling in opposite directions just the same. Every morning, Ellis walked the length of the property, checking fence lines and gates, scanning for tracks he didn't recognize. Every night, Clara watched the hills from the porch long after the goats had bedded down and the sky had turned black. Granger didn't come back right away. That was what made it worse. He let the silence build until even the birds seemed to hesitate before singing. The chickens started laying again, but Clara didn't trust it. Neither did Ellis. They were watching the edges now, like prey too tired to run but too proud to lie down. On the third night, it was the goats. Clara heard the noise first, a sharp bleat, then nothing. She was out of bed before she knew she'd moved, feet bare, rifle in hand, the cold floor jarring her fully awake. Ellis met her at the door. He didn't speak. They both just ran. The pen was open. Not broken. Just open. 3 goats gone. No blood, no mess, just gone. Like a signature, writ in absence. They tracked the prints halfway up the ridge, before the trail vanished in the dry wind. "This is a message," Ellis muttered. "He's telling us he can come whenever he wants." Clara tightened her grip on the rifle. "Then maybe it's time we sent one back." They didn't speak the rest of the night. But the next morning, Clara rode to the church. Not for prayer, though she did sit on the back bench, eyes closed for a while, hand over the necklace like it was a compass. She prayed for courage, for strength, for clarity, not vengeance. When she opened her eyes, she found Reverend Bell watching her. "Miss Whitley," he said gently. "Clara," she corrected, "I'm not that girl anymore." "No," he said, "you're not." She stood, smoothing her skirt. "I need help." He nodded. "Tell me." By sundown, 4 men had agreed to watch the ranch from afar. Good men. Men who didn't want a war but wouldn't turn their backs on decency either. None of them asked for money. Just nodded when Ellis explained the plan. 2 would stay hidden near the back trail. 2 more would watch from the barn loft, all armed, all ready. But the one who couldn't sleep that night wasn't Ellis. It was Clara. She sat by the hearth, boots unlaced, arms wrapped around her knees like she was a child again. Ellis came in quiet, sat across from her. "You think it'll come to shooting?" she asked. "Maybe." "I'm not scared of dying," she whispered, "but I'm scared of going back, of being powerless again." "You're not," he said. She looked up. "How do you know?" "Because I've seen powerless," Ellis said, voice low. "It don't ride out to stop a man like Granger. It don't walk barefoot with a rifle into the dark. And it sure don't give a goat stitches like you did." Clara smiled barely. "That goat bit me." She was scared, so were you. "But I did it anyway." "Exactly." They sat in the fire's glow, 2 shadows stitched together by silence. The next day they waited. Nothing came. Nor the next. On the third, Clara started to hope again. She should have known better. It was the 6th day, just before dusk, when the barn caught fire. It started at the west corner, straw soaked in something foul. Flames licked up the sideboards before Ellis even heard the crackle. Clara screamed. They ran. By the time they reached it, half the roof was gone. Ellis grabbed buckets, screaming for water. The others joined him, forming a ragged line from the pump. Clara threw sand and smothered flames with blankets. The animals had already been let out. Someone had done that first. A twisted mercy. By nightfall, the fire was out. But so was the barn. And Granger. Nowhere in sight. Only his calling card, a trail of boot prints in the dirt, deep, smug. Ellis stood at the wreckage and didn't say a word. Clara stood beside him, fists clenched. You still want to wait? She asked. No, Ellis said. Now I want to end it. They didn't wait till dawn. They left the goats with Reverend Bell, rode through the hills in silence, 2 rifles between them, a jug of water, and a fury neither of them had ever known how to speak. Granger's land sprawled wide and arrogant, 3 times the size of Ellis's, with fences that gleamed like polished teeth, and a house that loomed too tall for any man that small. They didn't sneak. They rode in like storm clouds. Granger came out onto his porch, arms folded. Well, he drawled, didn't expect you to show. We didn't come to talk, Ellis said. You came to threaten me. We came to finish it. Granger smirked, and here I thought you were the quiet sort. I was. Then he raised the rifle. Granger's men stepped out from behind the barn, 3 of them, guns drawn. Clara didn't flinch. She stepped forward. This land, this fight, it's not about fences or goats, she said. It's about power. You don't want land, you want obedience. Granger chuckled. Maybe I do. But you won't get it, she said. He tilted his head. What makes you so sure? Clara reached into her coat and pulled out the flyer she'd taken from the general store. She tossed it at his feet. I was a girl sold by men like you. You think I scare easy. You think I don't know what you are. Granger looked down at the paper. His eyes flickered. She's bluffing, one of his men said. No, Ellis said, she's not. Behind them, footsteps. Reverend Bell. And 10 men from town. All armed. All ready. Your fight's not just with him anymore, Bell said, voice calm. It's with every man here who still believes right matters. Granger's smile cracked. He looked at Clara. Then at the guns. Then back. Fine, he muttered. Take your goats, take your girl, but this ain't over. Clara stepped forward, so close he could smell the soot on her dress. Yes, it is. He didn't speak again. He turned and walked away. When it was over, when the sun had dipped behind the hills and the smell of smoke clung to everything, Clara and Ellis stood in the barn's ashes. It'll take time to rebuild, he said. She looked at him. We're not rebuilding it. He blinked. We're not. No, she said, we're building something new. She pulled the necklace from her collar. Held it out. I was always someone's daughter, someone's orphan, someone's shame. He took it, eyes wide. But now, she said, I want to be someone's future. Ellis didn't answer. He didn't have to. He kissed her, soft, sure, the way you do when there's nothing left to fear. The snow melted early that year. Whether it was mercy or chance, neither Clara nor Ellis wasted time wondering. The land, once dry and burned out by Granger's reach, softened beneath their boots. The fields turned green with effort, not luck, and the cabin, now widened by new timber and new hands, held warmth in its bones. They never rebuilt the barn. Not exactly. What they built instead wasn't just for the animals. It was long and low and open, meant for people, a place to rest, to gather, to learn how to work again, trust again. Folks from town called it the far house, because it stood farther out than most on land that had once been too wild to claim. But for those who had nowhere else to go, it was closer than anything they'd ever known. Ellis hung the first lantern himself. Clara painted the door, red, like the memory of fire, not the fear of it. And the goats, they multiplied. As did the children. The first came in the arms of a widow from Ellensburg who hadn't spoken in months. A boy, all ribs and dark eyes. He didn't smile for weeks. Then one day, he helped Clara muck the pens without being asked and said her name soft, like he was still trying it on. The second was a girl with a limp and a voice too loud for most. Clara called her Ruth. Ellis built her a wooden brace, and by spring she was racing the chickens. They never turned anyone away. Sometimes Clara wondered if Granger watched from a distance, if he sat up in his grand house and boiled at the sight of joy that didn't belong to him. But the truth was, she didn't care anymore. She had too much to do. Too many mouths to feed, hands to hold, songs to teach. On Clara's birthday, though she never told anyone when it actually was, Ellis carved her a necklace box. Inside it, nestled against worn velvet, was her old locket, polished and repaired, the hinge no longer broken. He didn't say anything when he gave it to her, just watched her open it like a man handing over something sacred. Clara cried for the first time in months. "Thought you hated birthdays," he teased, brushing her hair from her face. "I did," she said, "until I stopped counting what I'd lost and started seeing what I had." That night they sat by the fire. Not alone. Ruth and the boy, now named Jonah, were curled on the rug, playing a game with smooth stones. One of the other girls hummed softly as she braided straw. A man from town read aloud from a book in the corner, his voice low and warm. Clara watched them all, then looked at Ellis. "You know," she whispered, "this is the first time in my life I've ever felt like I belonged somewhere." Ellis nodded. "Me too." She smiled, then pulled something from her apron pocket. A key. Old brass, rusted at the teeth. He raised an eyebrow. "I've been holding it since the day I met you," she said. He took it, studying it. "To what?" "To nothing," she said. "That's the point. It was just something to carry, something to sell if I needed bread, but now." She reached up, took the locket from her neck and clicked the key inside it. "Now it opens something." He looked at her, and for a moment he was the man who'd found her all over again, barefoot and fierce, stubborn and soft, carrying children that weren't hers and a past too heavy for any one heart. And now she carried something else entirely. Legacy. Not written in names or deeds, but in hands calloused by kindness, in floors worn smooth by little feet, in laughter that came without fear. That winter they were full to bursting. A new roof had to be added. And when Clara stood at the head of the long table on the first snow of the year, she looked out at a dozen faces, some old, some new, and gave thanks not just for the food but for every moment that led her here. Even the broken ones. Especially the broken ones. Because without them, there'd have been no Ellis. No far house. No necklace to return, no key to give away. Only an auction that would have ended with a girl sold into silence. But instead there was family. And that was worth everything.